Welcome to Subramani. If you are a real rich guy, let's say, if not a Jeff Bezos, at least an Azim Premji or Sachin Tendulkar or Amitabh Bachchan or anybody, is there a chance that you will go and open an account in Zerodha or Robinhood or ICICI Direct and start trading stocks and buy some nonsense at ridiculous price or hoping that you will make money? Would you do something like that? Very unlikely. Would you put your money in an index fund and say, oh, I don't need to look at it at all? Again, very unlikely. You are very likely to hire somebody who is expensive, very well educated, well dressed, drives a big shiny car, preferably at least a Ferrari. Because when you're going to go and ask for a 50 crore check or a 100 crore check, you better go at least in a 5 crore car, right? So more chances of that. So the question is, are their fees justified? If they're taking, let's say they're taking a 2% fund management fee on a 100 crore portfolio, is their fees justified? Are they doing a great job in the fund management for which they are so famous, and they play golf with the right people, and are they justifying their fees? We really don't have any research in India saying that their fees is justified or not justified. We don't even have data as to how many people are catering to the people who are investing 50, 100,000 crores, right? That kind of numbers. So what you have to see is there some study like that in, say, US? And the answer is yes, luckily for us. So let me read from the research which they have done. So the chances are that you will draw similar parallels to India and find whether it is worth thinking of great people having great fund managers, and do these fund managers add value, or where do they go wrong, right? So the story, like they say, this study began very many years ago. I don't have the exact date. Lawrence Schmidt, who now works at MIT, was trained in the old school of economics, which asserts that people behave rationally, right, when they buy and sell stocks, and therefore carefully they sift through information, etc., like what we all of us believe. Oh, we are very rational, I know exactly what I'm doing. We don't, but we pretend that we do. We know how much mileage our car gives, which is a joke because we have no clue. If you don't write down, you have no clue how much mileage your car gives. But that was a digression. And so they had another person called Alex Imus, now who is working at University of Chicago School of Business. He was trained in behavioral finance, and he asserts that people's trading decisions can be steered off by pesky flaws of our brains, which is true. There's a lot of research today to say that judges give good decisions and bad decisions based on their hunger and when they want to go home, right? So investing also happens like that. In an imperfect world, when we invest, we will make all those perfect mistakes. And they met a professional investor named Rick D. Masico. He runs a company called Inalytics, Inalytics, analytics. So Inalytics, which tracks the investing activity of major financial companies, investors, in order to assess and improve their performance. He's let's call the performance coach of the investing field, right? That reminds me, I'm very surprised why fund managers don't have coaches, right? I'm offering my services to the smaller fund managers, but yeah, I'm wondering why you don't have a coach. If Sachin Tendulkar can need a coach, I don't know why Prashant Jain or Naren won't benefit by having a coach. I have no clue whether they have a coach. I'm just guessing. And after seeing a presentation by Imas, D. Masico offered the economists a lot of his data. And with the data, they went on to see how it works. And Schmidt, Imas, and D. Masico joined forces with Krakow Town. I'm not going to repeat that name, just let us call him Klacko. And now he works at the International Monetary Fund, and they analyzed data on 783 big time investors from January 2000 to March 2016, and the average size of portfolio was 600 million. not a small amount by any stretch, right? So they found that the investing managers are very good at picking stocks, but they're not so great at selling stocks, which is very easy to understand. Once I read this report, I get very actively involved, and I say what happens is, because when you buy wrong, you then sit and analyze thousands of times, why did you buy this, why did you buy this, why did you buy this, and then you say, okay, this promoter was from this city, don't touch this surname, don't touch this business, don't touch this industry, don't touch this accounting standards are not good. Then you speak to some investment advisor, some research analyst who will say, no sir, the quality of balance sheet is very poor, read the notes on account. Then you go and read the needs on account. So the buying process, in my mind at least, is very, very clear and nice. So if I want to invest for the long run, I look for a lot of these things. Then I also look for approval among peers. Have fund managers picked it as, for us originally it used to be Mr. Deepak Parekh of HDFC Limited. Go and look at their portfolio, saying have they invested. If they have invested for us, it meant corporate governance is taken care of. Don't look at it me very odd, because today you have far more data available. I'm talking of how we invested in the 1980s, how we did research report in the 1980s. We would pick a stock just because it was there in the HDFC Limited balance sheet. That was the starting point, and then we would do research and we'd say, okay, we don't have to at least worry about corporate governance, right? That is how we were doing research. Today, too many things are available at the flip of a button, flip of a switch, right? So the first finding that these financiers found that these guys were real whizzes when it comes to buying stocks. I completely agree. So I know why I should not have bought, right? But I have done very little analysis of why I sold. So let me give you a list of shares I've sold. I've sold Infosys, I've sold HDFC Limited, I've sold MRF, I have sold Wipro, I have sold Silverline. I'm very happy about it. I've sold Pateja Forging. I'm thrilled about it. I have not sold Supreme. I have sold Hero Honda. And I have not done any analysis to why I sold. I sold because I was very happy, because Hero Honda, I think I sold in 2013 or 2014, and I had a fantastic ride, I think 1985 or 1987, whenever the issue came right then. So I had a 26-year ride. I have no regrets on that. MRF, after I sold it, went up and then it has come down, so I don't have any great regret. But the most important thing is I don't do a sales side analysis. So I recently sold EID Parry. I sold some Coromandel International, bought it back, sold some, could not buy it back because it went up because of some China ban. So, but one thing very clear is we don't do enough research on the sell side. So we do a lot of research on the buy side. We see why we went wrong, but we don't do research on why after selling, let's say I sold an Apollo Hospital is 135. Then I was smart enough to buy it at some 500. Then I sold it at some 1200 or 1100 or 1200. Today it is at 3000. So the analysis as to why I bought is done much more than why I why I sold a share. Why did I sell? So I think the conclusion was they came out with a study which said selling fast and buying slow. Reference obviously being to Daniel Kahneman's book of Thinking Fast and Slow. The book summarizes decades of this research and says, not talking about the books, about behavioral economics. So largely what happens is when again quoting from the book, there are two parts of the brain, one which thinks fast and one which thinks slow. The thinking fast brain is used when there is danger, right? So you find a lion chasing you, you don't have too much time to sit and analyze as to what you want to do. You just find a tree, you climb the tree. You find water, you jump into the water and hope there is no crocodile there. This is what your brain must have done so many 10,000 years ago when you were being chased by a lion in Serengeti or in Gir or wherever. But as far as selling is concerned, you don't think so much. You are looking at some data, suddenly you find that there is something wrong with the management, something has gone wrong, and poof, you sell it off. And then you don't think about why you sold. You sold because you got scared of something, right? Something like that happened and you sold. So to test the theory, the economists look closer at which stocks the investors tend to sell the one and which one do they hold. This is again a funny thing. When a share goes up, you're tempted to look at it. There's a lot of research on it. Like suppose you bought Zomato at 110 and then it goes to, let's say, 2,500. Chances are a lot of people will be writing about it and writing articles like, even if you bought it at the IPO at the price of 130, whatever the issue price, And if you are dealt it, you would have made 10 crores, 20 crores, 200 crores, whatever. So these kind of stories and FOMO, so you feel, oh my God, so then you go and buy. But then you suddenly hear one bad news and you sell because you say, oh, nahin, abhi to pandemic ho gaya, everything will fall. So I have some very well qualified, educated people who sold in April 2020. Unfortunately, he didn't tell me, because if he had told me, I would have bought more. And it is not very surprising that these elite investors also fall to the same fund managers, same problems which we retailers have. And he says the least part of the reason is the general behavior economics inside, that people make worse decisions when they lack feedback, when you do not know what is happening in that company. Take a company like Deccan Gold, you don't know what is happening. Suddenly the government changes rules and the share price falls from 35 to 20, then it goes back from 20 to 35. It keeps fluctuating. You need to have tremendous amount of patience to hold on, because a mining company, for example, doesn't pay any dividend. You're only hoping that it will find enough gold, it will get the license, it will be able to mine it, and that it will be able to mine the gold and sell it at a profitable price. At that stage, the price of the share can go from something like 20 to something like even like 200 or 500 or whatever, simply because they found enough gold and they got a license. But look at the risk that it runs, the risk of licensing, right? So the ability to sit tight, I think the ability to analyze your bad sales, I think that's the most important learning for me from this research report. And so it says that even look at the extremely talented, highly experienced and well incentivized expert investors, they're still human beings, right? So they will make mistakes. So I think you should use your instincts, you should use your research and buy, but while selling, you should put it through a committee and make sure that all angles are considered. And in case of me, in my case, what I do is I now don't sell a successful company in totality. Let's say I've got 5,000 shares of a particular company. At best, I will sell about 500 shares, and sometimes I would even break it into shares, lot size of 100. Sell it, see what is happening, sell it, like you can do an SIP in shares, you can do an SWP also. Unless you hear bad news, because a cockroach is never alone. The cockroach will be followed by a team of cockroaches, right? So unless you hear something like that, don't sell off completely. So assuming that I had bought Wipro in 1980 at $10, and it is now worth 700 crores. The question to ask is not whether it is true. Of course it is true, mathematically provable, so many bonuses, splits, dividends, etc. What is very important is, could you have sat through it without ignoring the noise by the people around you saying, boss, kitna aur wait karega, right? So if you can put a process for selling, you'd be better off than what we are. I'm starting to put a process. Thank you.